Hi everyone, New to Me Face Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Westside Gunn project, 12. Here we have the latest project from Buffalo rapper boom bap auteur Mr. Westside Gunn, a man who has slowly built one of the most respected brands in hip-hop today, that's GRISELDA, a label and collective that really over the past 10 years has helped ushered in a new demand for grimy, coke-dusted throwback rap bangers that have a vintage flair. And specifically in the case of Westside Gunn, we're also talking about bringing a high fashion, artsy sort of energy to this sound and style. Now, Westside Gunn is also a guy who loves a sequel, loves a series. And of all of these episodic projects, 12 here is the latest installment of the most long-running strain of them. That would be Hitler Wears Hermes, which title-wise at number 10, he decided to start stripping the titles down to just the numbers for obvious reasons. But this is not the only change the series has undergone as of late. In fact, last year is when we got number 11, and that is the first instance in which I believe something in this series had been whittled down to pretty much an EP's length. We got 5 tracks and 16 minutes of material on that one. And while the project did get kind of lost in the flurry of other Griselda-related albums to release that year, it's still a consequential moment in Westside Gunn's discography, especially considering that its release is essentially in tribute to a very close associate of his, Big Dump, who was tragically killed in 2024. Now he is essentially tributing him once again with the cover art of this latest project here too, where again we see the text "Free Sly" for Big Dump, but 12 over here doesn't just simply function as a tribute, but also a snapshot of where Westside Gunn is artistically at the moment. Now, truth be told, the world of Griselda Records is looking a lot different these days than it did when we initially saw the label really gaining traction, and most records under the Griselda name were pretty much Westside Gunn, Conway the Machine, Benny the Butcher. And these days, the circle is still very tightly knit, but a lot of the faces and names have changed. And as a result, Westside Gunn is leaning a lot more into features from increasingly familiar faces like SD Knack and Stove God Cooks, who seemingly gets more and more unhinged with each series of appearances he gets on a new Westside Gunn project. We have a trim track list on this record too, but not a meager one either, essentially 10 songs and an interlude/intro. And once again, yeah, it's pretty much Westside Gunn curating beats and verses and vibes from those who he seems to trust the most in terms of getting a good, solid project together. The interlude and opener Michelle World that I was referring to earlier, I'm not exactly sure what the source material on this track is. I'm sorry to plead ignorance, but if I am to guess, and I am guessing, I'm wondering if this is like some weird kind of like soul recreation AI sample type stuff, because again it does sound like we are getting a loop from an old soul tune, but the vocalist on top of the track is singing "Who is the Goat." It's very funny and certainly an entertaining tone setter for the entire thing. But the first full-length track we have on the record, BOSWELL, we dip right into usual boom bap Griselda territory, and total lyrical chaos breaks loose with hype deliveries and colorful ad-libs, persistent rhyme schemes, lots of over-the-top lyrical imagery, and just the kinetic chemistry between each person on the track of like a Wu-Tang cipher. We have SD Knack bragging about throwing your baby mama off of a Ferris wheel. We have Westside making his usual wrestling references, on top of saying, "I don't know Spanish, but for work, I'ma speak some." Meanwhile, Stove God is describing Louis Vuitton airbags in the midst of a car crash. And even though I feel like I've heard this before from Westside Gunn more or less, it still hits, especially since these days it seems like he's putting as much effort into rhyming as he is kind of just creating the vibe. But still, with that being said, as the track list continues, whether or not this album is really grabbing my attention depends upon whether or not a particular track just feels redundant in the greater sea of similar sounding songs that Westside has released previously. For example, the song Adam Page is just kind of okay. Meanwhile, the lengthier VEERT is a drumless lyrical meditation where Stove God Cooks and SD Knack shoulder the brunt of the song hilariously, with Stove God Cooks making mention of taking his twins to Disneyland and selling a brick outside of Epcot Center. Estinac also brings more very witty wordplay with lots of juxtapositions between just luxury, but also just a very seedy, drug-dealing type of narrative frames. Then soon after this, we have 055, which in my opinion is the closest I've come to feeling like a Westside Gunn track is like a religious experience, as we have all the crispy soul chops, the vinyl crackle, and Stove God Cooks giving what sounds kind of like a sermon on the song. Praise fly, praise stove, praise both. Praise fly, praise stove, praise both. Then we have Health Science, where things tone down a little bit. This track is much spacier and more melodic than pretty much every other song here. Doesn't have quite the bite of the rest of the record, but it's fine. It does feature a very aspirational verse from Westside Gunn that I like a lot. And then we're introduced to a relatively new voice through features on the project, Mr. Brother Tom Sos, who's kind of an up-and-comer in the Griselda ring. And while I think his flows on the record are solid, vocally speaking, he does sound a little green in comparison with all of these raspy, grimy giants surrounding him on the rest of the project. While there's certainly talent there, he just feels overshadowed in comparison with everyone else here. And I don't know, it doesn't make for the strongest material on the record, I'll say that. The second half of 12 is a bit of a mixed bag with a couple of more redundant moments. Bury Me with a Stove is also mostly memorable for Estinac's completely unhinged groaning ad-libs throughout the entire song. He's just going, ah! But then the record really truly does finish out strong with Outlander, where Westside Gunn brings just incomparable charisma and swagger over these kind of somber and woozy horn loops that are paired with lyricism that seems like Westside is going into a bit of an internal rap monologue, talking about his bitterness toward other lesser rappers, hoping that his friend Sly gets out soon. And then also dropping lines like, face in Lagerfeld stocking, clocking, line 'em up, I watched 'em, wash 'em, every dopehead, say I got it, which in terms of like the combination of influences, reference points there, that's just like quintessential Fly God. Then we had this amazing closing track featuring Stove God, where he is just like singing his way through like these luxurious music samples about how the numbers on the stamp might change and the numbers on the scale might change, but he won't change. Rarely have bricks and dealing and cooking sounded so poetic and glamorous. Also, the gospel-style group vocals that turn up later into the track are insane. They're just gorgeous. If only more moments on this album sounded this transcendental. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like 12 is essentially Westside Gunn, steady as she goes, in a way. Another chapter in the ongoing saga of his musical life. It's certainly not the biggest or most ambitious or most radical record that you're ever going to hear in the WSG catalog, but still, even operating in a somewhat predictable gear, Westside Gunn is putting out some of the best stuff of his career, and I think really getting into a unique collaborative flow with guys like Knack and Stove God, who he's been working with so often at this point that there's just a certain vibe now that they and only they can kind of conjure together, which is why I'm feeling about a strong 6 to a light 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Westside Gunn, forever.